There are moments when the world shows you just how much progress is an illusion. For Ammani Rivers, that moment came on a Tuesday afternoon in the lobby of his own hotel. When police officers dragged him across the counter, they were fighting over and arrested him for being in a space that was legally, rightfully, undeniably his. But the police were making a huge mistake. Before becoming a hotel owner, Ammani Rivers had worked as a civil rights researcher for 20 years. He knew how the system worked. He knew how to document everything and how to fight back with undeniable evidence. And he was about to remind everyone in Savannah, Georgia, that underestimating a black woman with resources, determination, and righteous anger was a mistake they would regret for the rest of their careers. The police had messed with the wrong person, and she was innocent. The morning sun streamed through the golden windows of the Golden Haven Hotel. Ammani Rivers was pacing in the lobby. She was 42, but the stress of the last decade had carved fine lines around her eyes and made her look a little older. She had experienced too many negative events in the last 10 years. But despite everything, she was still standing, unbroken. "Good morning, Mrs. Peterson," Ammani said to the elderly white guest who had been staying at the Golden Haven monthly for the past 3 years. "I hope you slept well?" he asked politely. Customer satisfaction was paramount to him. "As dreamy as ever," said Mrs. Peterson. "And Gloria's morning coffee, I swear, that woman has magic in her hands," Peterson continued. Ammani smiled and looked toward the reception area, where Gloria James hummed an old gospel tune as she carefully polished the brass fixtures. 68-year-old Gloria had been working here since Ammani bought Golden Haven 5 years ago. She was one of the first hired and remained one of the most loyal employees. Gloria was cleaning the entire surface with her worn hands. "These door handles have never looked this beautiful, Gloria," Ammani said. Gloria's eyes crinkled with pride. "Nothing less than perfect is acceptable in our home, Mrs. Rivers," she replied. "Our home." Every time Gloria said those words, Ammani's heart warmed, because that was exactly what Golden Haven was. It was crucial that everyone saw it as their home. Ammani had worked hard for that. Logan Shaw stood behind the reception desk. 35 years old, he technically had the qualifications for the position of general manager. But there was something about him that always unsettled Ammani's instincts. She sensed something strange. He deliberately ignored the conversation between Ammani and Gloria, his fingers tapping impatiently on the computer keyboard. He noticed his jaw clenching, as it always did when Ammani referred to the hotel as ours, instead of mine. 3 years ago, Ammani had hired Logan against his better judgment. His impressive resume had won him over. But he had immediately regretted it, yet he had been so focused on maintaining the hotel's profitability that he hadn't found the time to address the growing tension Ammani had to manage. But this situation wouldn't last much longer. Settling into his office right next to the lobby, Ammani opened his laptop. Morning light streamed through his window, illuminating the lobby and giving him a clear view of operations. A notification caught his eye. A new 5-star review had just been posted online. He clicked to open it. Golden Haven is not just a hotel. It's an experience of perfection, Savannah's most precious jewel of hospitality. This review made Ammani very happy. It felt good to see his efforts rewarded. Pride swelled in his heart. This was what his father had dreamed of 60 years ago, when blacks weren't allowed to stay in such hotels or even own them. While working as a doorman in this building, Clayton Rivers had carried the luggage of wealthy white people for 40 years, cleaned their rooms, smiled through condescending and casual racism, all the while dreaming of the day his daughter would own a place like this. Ammani had made her father's dream come true. The happiness this brought was beyond compare. His father had passed away before this dream was realized. But Ammani carried her father with her every day, through her respectful treatment of her employees, her insistence on perfection without sacrificing humanity, and her determination to make Golden Haven a place where everyone was truly welcome. A sharp knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Logan Shaw stood at the door, his smile not quite reaching his pale blue eyes. Ammani sensed something was wrong. "Miss Rivers," he said, "I wanted to revisit our appearance standards." He was moving in a way Ammani didn't like. Ammani's hands hovered over the keyboard. "Go on," she said. Logan closed the door behind him. "Some of our cleaning staff are wearing quite ethnic hairstyles, braids, natural textures. I'm concerned about maintaining our professional image," Logan said. "Our staff's natural hair is professional, Mr. Shaw," Ammani said. He was a little angry, but kept himself under control. "We've discussed this before. Their appearance meets all standards, and we've never had any complaints from guests," he replied. "Our customers have certain expectations," Logan said. "Yes, they expect excellent service and they consistently receive it," Ammani said. "Our 5-star reviews repeatedly mention our staff's professionalism." "Is there anything else?" she asked. Logan's nostrils flared slightly. It was a sign Ammani had learned to recognize. He wasn't used to being challenged. especially by a black woman, and one who owned the business he managed. The weekend figures, he began, but heavy footsteps in the hallway interrupted him. Deshaun Rivers appeared in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the space. Ammani's 28-year-old son had his father's height and build. "Good morning, Mom," he said. Then giving Logan a brief nod, he said, "Mr. Shaw." "Deshaun," Ammani smiled. Her son had joined Golden Haven's operations team 2 years after leaving the military, bringing with him organizational skills and protective instincts that sometimes bordered on overprotectiveness. "How were the meetings with the vendors?" she asked. "Productive. Our new linen supplier's prices are better, and the quality is just as good," he said. He placed a file on the table and positioned himself lightly between it and Logan. "However, there were some issues with the restaurant's product delivery. I'll give you more information later," he said. Logan cleared his throat. "Well, I need to get back to the front. The Thompsons' wedding party is about to start," he said, and backed away. After he left, Deshaun's face darkened. "I don't trust that guy, Mom," he warned Ammani. "I don't trust him either, baby," Ammani sighed. "But he knows his job, and he brings in business," she replied. "A certain kind of business," Deshaun muttered. "Have you noticed how the demographic of the guests has changed since he started? There are fewer black families, fewer people who look like us," he said. Ammani had noticed. Golden Haven had been marketed as a place open to everyone, a place where anyone could experience luxury hospitality. But slowly, subtly, the clientele had become whiter, wealthier, and more exclusive. This was not what Ammani wanted at all. In her view, anyone could stay at this hotel. He stood up and walked to the window of his office, which had a clear view of the lobby. Gloria was arranging fresh magnolia flowers in crystal vases. A young black couple was checking in. They had children with them. "That's the point," said Ammani. "When I was that child's age, we couldn't even stay in hotels like this. There were signs on the doors saying no blacks allowed. Now he can see someone like himself owning a hotel like this." The movement near the elevators caught Ammani's attention. Logan was talking quietly with a man in an expensive gray suit. Something in their body language triggered Ammani's investigative instincts. Something was strange. The man in the gray suit walked quickly toward the entrance. He recognized the silver hair, the confident stride, the practiced smile. City Councilman Walter Reeve, chairman of the Urban Renewal Committee, the man who had praised the revitalization of the historic Grayson Street neighborhood in the news last month, the same neighborhood where 3 black-owned businesses had mysteriously lost their leases before being purchased by developers for far below their value. "Mom," said Deshaun, coming up beside her, following her gaze. "Are you okay?" he asked. Ammani watched Reeve disappear through the revolving door. "I'm fine, baby, I'm fine," she replied. She was trying to stay calm, but she wasn't, because her years as a civil rights researcher had taught her to recognize patterns. And the patterns she saw, Logan's secret meetings, the changing demographics, the appearance standards targeting black employees, pointed to something bigger than simple prejudice. And Ammani Rivers had learned long ago that the best defense is a good offense. If someone was plotting against her job, she needed to know before they acted. She just didn't know how much time she had. That made her a little anxious. In the afternoon, the Southern Teachers Association's annual conference brought a flood of educators to Golden Haven's doors. Gloria James stood by the entrance, dressed in her delivery uniform, her dark blue shirt soaked through with sweat from hours of work in Georgia's brutal spring heat. "Take your time, Mr. Washington," Gloria said. Marcus Washington, the delivery driver who had been bringing her sheets for 3 years, nodded gratefully. "Thank you, ma'am. I need a minute to catch my breath. I've been on the road since early this morning," he replied. The long drive and the heat had taken quite a toll on him. "You delivered our sheets right on time as always," Gloria consoled him, patting him lightly on the shoulder. "At least we can offer you some water and a place to rest," she said. Around them, hotel guests, accustomed to luxury, strolled through the lobby with relaxed confidence. Everything was peaceful, professional, and completely normal, until Logan Shaw's voice cut through the lobby like a whip. "What's this?" he shouted. He walked with great anger. Gloria straightened her back, her hand still firmly on Mr. Washington's arm. "Mr. Washington is our linen delivery driver, Mr. Shaw." "I don't care who he claims to be," Logan said. "This is a 4-star hotel, not a street corner rest stop," he said. Mr. Washington tried to stand up. "I'm leaving, sir. I don't want to cause any trouble," he replied. "Mr. Shaw," he said, his voice clear and firm as he exited the Ammani office. The lobby fell silent, all eyes turning to him to watch the confrontation. "Enough," he said. Logan turned, his lips curving into something less than a smile. "Mr. Rivers, this is a security issue. We cannot allow random people wandering around our lobby. It sends the wrong message to our guests," he said, trying to salvage the situation. "Mr. Washington has been delivering our linens for 3 years," Ammani said. He's a valued partner in this business, and Gloria was absolutely right to offer him water on a day when the temperature was over 32 degrees. Logan's face darkened. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you can't make these kinds of operational decisions. I'm the general manager, and I say, he continued. He was standing up to his boss. And I'm the owner, Ammani cut him off. This is my property, my business, my decision. Mr. Washington will stay as long as he needs to rest after working in this heat. He stated his decision clearly. The two stood facing each other in the middle of the lobby, the white general manager and the black owner. Their conflict suddenly laid bare for everyone present to see. Logan shifted his jaw as he calculated his next move. Finally, with some effort, he managed a professional smile. Of course, you are absolutely right. I apologize for the misunderstanding, Mr. Washington. Please take as much time as you need, he said. But when he looked into Ammani's eyes, there was no apology there. There was only cold anger and nothing else. As Logan retreated to his office, Ammani helped Mr. Washington to his feet. I'm so sorry about this. Please take as long as you need to rest, she said, assisting him. Thank you, ma'am, said Mr. Washington. But I should probably go. I don't want to cause trouble for your manager. You're not the one causing trouble. He is, she said. Ammani squeezed his shoulder gently. Gloria, make sure Mr. Washington gets some lemon cookies from the kitchen before he leaves, she said. As she returned to her office, Ammani couldn't help but think she had made a very serious mistake. She had humiliated him. And men like Logan Shaw didn't forgive that kind of humiliation. Deshaun was waiting in his office, a worried look on his face. Mom, I don't like this situation, he said. Neither do I, baby, Ammani replied. Maybe we should start looking for a new general manager. Someone who truly appreciates what you've built here, said Deshaun. Ammani sat down at her desk. We'll look, but I have to be strategic about this. Logan has connections with the tourism board, the Chamber of Commerce, and half the city council. If I fire him for no reason, it could damage our reputation, she said. She had to make a smart move. Everything she had built in her life could slip through her fingers. Protecting a delivery driver working in this heat from heat stroke isn't the same as firing him without cause. If Logan frames this as tolerating loafing or jeopardizing the guest experience, then so be it, he said. Ammani opened the calendar on his computer. Give me 2 weeks. I'll document everything, build a case, and then we'll make a change, he said. 2 weeks. It seemed like enough time. It wasn't. Too much could happen. Everything could go wrong. Less than 2 hours later, while Ammani was reviewing the week's financial reports, his office door opened without a knock. Logan stood there, flanked by 2 police officers. The officers' faces were stern, and their hands were on their service belts. And in that moment, Ammani Rivers learned that sometimes 2 hours is enough time for your enemies to destroy everything you've built. Ma'am, we need you to step away from your desk and come with us, said one of the officers. Sergeant Dale Hellner was 43 years old and 1.88 meters tall. His partner, Officer Tommy Clean, stood slightly behind him. Ammani looked at Logan, who stood at the door with a carefully crafted look of concern on his face. Ammani moved calmly. Officers, I'm Ammani Rivers. I own this hotel. What's the matter? She asked. Hellner's expression didn't change. We received a report of trespassing and harassment. Hotel management has requested that we remove you from the premises, he said. This was clearly a lie. Logan had made up a story. For a moment, Ammani thought she had misheard. Trespassing? In my own hotel? She asked. Ma'am, we will not discuss this, Hellner said, moving his hand toward her handcuffs. You can come quietly, or we can make this difficult, he warned sternly. Ammani's mind was racing. This was a trap. It had to be. But making a scene, resisting, would only make things worse. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling my lawyer, she said. Hellner's hand shot out and knocked the phone from his hand. It hit the floor and the screen cracked. You'll have time to talk on the phone after your procedures are complete. Right now you must follow instructions, he intervened. Sergeant, this is my property, said Ammani. I have documents proving my ownership. My business license, deed, tax records. They're all registered with the city. This is a mistake, she tried to warn him. Logan stepped forward, his voice carrying a practiced sadness throughout the office. Officers, I apologize for taking your time, but this woman has been harassing our staff for weeks. She insists she owns the hotel, and when we ask her to leave, she gets increasingly aggressive. We tried to handle it quietly, but after today's incident with the delivery driver, he continued. That's a lie, Ammani said, her voice rising despite her efforts to remain calm. I am the registered owner of the Golden Haven Hotel. I can prove it, she said. Mom, our conversation is over, he said. Hellner grabbed the woman's arm, his grip immediately painful. You're coming with us, now, he ordered. Mom, Deshaun's voice echoed through the lobby. She was returning from lunch when she saw the police enter her mother's office. Now she ran forward, her aggressive stance betraying her military training. What's going on? She asked. Sir, step back. Officer Cleany moved to stop him. reaching for his stun gun with one hand. "That's my mother. She owns this hotel," Deshawn replied. Gloria appeared behind Deshawn, her face drained of color. Several hotel guests had gathered in the lobby, phones out, watching the confrontation unfold. Ammani locked eyes with his son. "Deshawn, stay calm. Call Aunt Layla. Tell her to call Attorney Thompson. Don't do anything, just record this," he said. Ammani was acting wisely because he knew he was right, but Hellner was tired of waiting. He pulled Ammani so hard he stumbled in the lobby. When Ammani tried to regain his balance, Hellner interpreted it as resistance. "He's resisting," he yelled, and suddenly his partner arrived, and the two of them grabbed Ammani's arms and pinned him to the floor. Ammani's face slammed into the marble reception desk, and screams and cries rose up in the lobby. His arms were pulled so hard behind his back that his shoulder joints screamed in agony. "Stop, you're hurting him," said Gloria. There were cameras everywhere, recording from multiple angles as Hellner pressed his weight into Ammani's back, grinding his face into the cold marble, and Clinny cuffed his wrists. "I'm not resisting," Ammani gasped, each word an effort against the pressure on her chest. "I'm the owner. Check the city records." The Golden Haven Hotel is registered under Ammani Elizabeth Rivers. But it seemed like she was talking to herself. Neither police officer was listening to her. "Of course you are," Hellner said with a mocking smile and pulled him to his feet. Logan stood behind the reception desk. He was further motivating the police officers with multiple lies. "Liar," Ammani began, but Hellner cut him off. "Enough, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it," he warned sternly. As he led him toward the entrance, Ammani saw his reflection in the ornate mirrors in the lobby. The heavy doors of Golden Haven opened, and Ammani was exposed to the bright afternoon sunlight. Passers-by on the street stopped and stared at him. The patrol car was parked right in front of the hotel's main entrance. Hellner pushed Ammani into the back seat with unnecessary force. Through the window he could see Deshawn talking on the phone. Gloria was standing next to him, crying. And behind them, Logan Shaw stood with great satisfaction. The Savannah Police Department's central booking facility reeked of disinfectant, sweat, and despair. Ammani sat on a metal bench in the holding cell. Her fingerprints had been taken, her photo taken, and she had been processed like a common criminal. The booking clerk listed her charges with bureaucratic indifference, trespassing, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest. It was all a huge lie. "Phone call," said a female officer, opening the cell door. Ammani was led to a dirty payphone on the wall. "Aunt Leela?" "It's me," said Ammani. "Baby," said Leela Washington. "Deshawn called me. Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine." "Did he find Attorney Thompson?" Ammani replied. "Jada is already on it. First thing tomorrow morning, she'll file for an emergency bail hearing. Also, baby, this thing is all over social media. Videos from the hotel. It's going viral," she said. Ammani closed her eyes. Viral. That meant publicity, which meant pressure. And that could work for or against him, depending on how it was presented. "What are people saying?" he asked. Ideas were flooding his mind at that very moment. Mostly anger. "Black hotel owner arrested in her own lobby" is trending on Twitter. But there are also those who say, "You must have done something to deserve it." "The police don't arrest anyone for no reason," replied Aunt Leela. "Time's up," said the officer. "Aunt Leela, I want you to do something. Go to my house. There's a locked file cabinet in my office at home. The key is in my jewelry box, the box that plays Amazing Grace. Inside the cabinet is a file labeled Golden Haven Property Documents. I want you to take everything in that folder to Attorney Thompson tonight," he said. Ammani was determined to use all the information and documents he had. "I'll do it right away, baby," said Aunt Leela. Ammani's voice cracked slightly. "I hope so, Auntie. I really hope so." Returning to the cell, Ammani assessed the situation with the analytical mind that made her a successful investigator. This was no random event. Logan had probably planned this for weeks. The question was why, and who else was involved. Her mind was racing with questions. Her thoughts were interrupted when the cell door opened again. A young officer entered, his name tag reading Roar. He was about 25 years old, with a nervous energy that suggested he was relatively new to the job. "Ms. Rivers?" he asked quietly, glancing behind him to make sure no one was watching them. "I'm Officer Jason Roar. I wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened," he said. Ammani studied him carefully. "Were you there?" she asked. "No, ma'am, but I heard Hellner and Cleany talking about it, and I saw the videos. That's not right. Everyone knows Golden Haven is your hotel. My sister got married there last year. You personally made sure the reception went perfectly," he said. Seeing an officer who recognized him finally pleased Ammani. "The Roar Martinez wedding. It was a beautiful ceremony," Ammani said. "Yes," he said, taking out his phone, briefly showing the screen and putting it back in his pocket. "There's not much I can do, but I copied the footage from my body camera today. Not the arrest, because I wasn't there. But when Hellner and Cleany returned to the station, I was on duty. They were talking to Sergeant Morrison about the arrest. Some of what they said doesn't match the official report, he warned Ammani. Why are you telling me this? Ammani asked. Officer Rohr looked him in the eye. Because my father was a black man who ran a barber shop for 30 years. 3 years ago, the city decided to redevelop his block. They decided to tear down the building, forced him out. 6 months later, he died. The doctor said it was a heart attack, but I think his heart was broken. I'm sick of watching people like Logan Shaw and Councilman Reeve ruin everything they touch, hiding behind the excuse of development and progress, he replied. For Ammani, this was a clear answer. Councilman Reeve, what does he have to do with this, he asked. I don't know exactly, but I saw him meeting with Logan Shaw and with developers from Savco, the company that bought all the properties in my father's block, he said. He looked at the door again. I have to go, but Ms. Rivers, fight this, and if you need testimony about what I've heard, I'll give it. Not everyone in this department is corrupt, he said. After he left, Ammani sat in her cell and thought about the sequence of events. Councilman Reeve, Logan Shaw, Savco Development, the hotel, the fake arrest to discredit him. Everything was starting to make sense. The next morning, the bail hearing took place in the courtroom. Jada had spent the night reviewing all the documents Aunt Leela had given her. Your Honor, this is perhaps the most egregious case of wrongful arrest I've encountered in my 15-year career, Jada began. My client, Ammani Elizabeth Rivers, is the registered owner of the Golden Haven Hotel, she stated. She pulled out a thick file. Here is the deed registered with the Chatham County Clerk's Office 5 years ago, she said, presenting all the other information and documents she had to the court. Everything is very clear and straightforward. The prosecutor, a young man named Davis, who looked increasingly uncomfortable, shuffled his papers. Your Honor, the arresting officers were responding to a legitimate complaint from the hotel management. The management employed by my client, Jada interrupted. Mr. Logan Shaw is the general manager. He works for Ms. Rivers. He has no authority to have her arrested for trespassing on property her employer legally owns. Judge Morales looked at the prosecutor over his reading glasses. Mr. Davis, did your office verify the property situation before making these charges? We relied on the police report, Your Honor. That report was based on the statement of a disgruntled employee trying to get his boss arrested, Jada said. Your Honor, I demand that all charges be dropped immediately and that my client be released. Judge Morales reviewed the documents with growing displeasure. Finally, he looked up. Mr. Davis, these charges are dismissed. Ms. Rivers, you are free to go. He paused, a stern expression on his face. Furthermore, I order a thorough investigation into how this arrest was permitted to take place. Arresting a business owner for trespassing on his own property based solely on an employee's statement indicates either gross incompetence or something worse. Ammani, having emerged from the last 18 hours of nightmare, stood up and saw the gallery of the courtroom. Deshaun was sitting in the front row, his relief evident on his face. Next to him, Aunt Leila wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. Behind them were a dozen familiar faces. Gloria, other hotel employees, regular customers, members of the Baptist Women's Association that his mother belonged to. But in the back, trying not to be noticed, sat Logan Shaw. And next to him, Assemblyman Walter Reeve. They weren't celebrating, they were calculating. Because Ammani's release wasn't the end of their plans, it was just a setback. Outside the courthouse, as Ammani stood on the steps with Jada, Deshaun, and Aunt Leila, reporters shouted their questions. The news had truly gone viral. The arrest video had been viewed over 2 million times in 24 hours. Miss Rivers, will you sue the police department? Miss Rivers, did you know your boss would have you arrested? Miss Rivers, what will you say to those who claim you resisted arrest? Jada raised her hand for silence. My client will make a brief statement. Ammani stepped forward, her face still bearing the marks of being slammed against the counter. She wore a navy suit brought by Aunt Leila, her natural curls pulled back in a professional style. She looked exactly as she was, a successful businesswoman, persecuted for existing because she was black. Yesterday, I was arrested in the lobby of my own hotel, she began, her voice steady and clear. Not because I broke any law, not because I caused any disturbance, but because my general manager told the police that I entered property I legally owned without permission. My face was slammed against the marble counter, I was handcuffed, and I was accused of crimes I didn't commit. She paused for a moment to let her words sink in. This wasn't just an attack on me, it was an attack on every black business owner told they don't belong in the spaces they built. It was an attack on every woman whose authority is questioned because of her gender or race. It was an attack on every person who learned that property means nothing when someone in a badge believes the word of a white man over documented evidence. The cameras flashed. I will file a federal civil rights lawsuit against everyone involved in this incident, and I will investigate why my CEO thought he could arrest me with impunity. Because I suspect there is a bigger story here. A story involving corruption, conspiracy, and an attempt to steal what I have built over the years. She looked directly into the nearest camera. To those who think they can scare me into leaving Golden Haven, I say you've made a serious miscalculation. I didn't survive 20 years as a civil rights investigator to be defeated by a corrupt administrator and his police accomplices. This fight is just beginning. Descending the courthouse steps, Aunt Leela squeezed her hand. Your father would be proud of you, girl. Ammani hoped he would be, because the war she had just declared would require all her skills and the tenacity her father had taught her, all the lessons from her investigative career, and all the strength she possessed. Logan Shaw and his supporters had made their move. Now it was Ammani's turn, and she was certain they would regret underestimating what a black woman with documents, determination, and righteous anger could achieve. The video was viewed 23 million times within 72 hours. While the arrest was the most shared clip, there were many videos taken from different angles, all telling the same story. In her own hotel lobby, while asserting her property rights, hotel staff and guests watched in horror as a well-dressed black woman was brutally beaten, while a white manager carefully maintained his neutrality in the background. The internet did what the internet does. It investigated. Within hours, amateur detectives found Ammani's business registration, his LinkedIn profile detailing his 20 years in civil rights investigations, photos of him at Chamber of Commerce events, and articles about Golden Haven's restoration work. They found his father's obituary from 10 years ago, where his father had worked for 40 years. They found everything that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that Ammani Rivers was exactly who he claimed to be, and the reaction was swift and brutal. Sergeant Hellner and Officer Klain were placed on administrative leave until the investigation was complete. The Savannah Police Department's phone lines were flooded with demanding calls. The mayor held a press conference and promised a thorough investigation, but carefully avoided admitting any wrongdoing. But what truly shifted the balance of power was the community's response. 3 days after the arrest, Ammani stood on the steps of Golden Haven, watching a scene that choked her with emotion. A line of people stretched around the block, conference teachers who had witnessed his arrest, members of the Baptist Women's Union his mother belonged to, small business owners from Savannah, university students from the local HBCU, veterans groups his father was part of. They all carried signs, "We stand with Ammani," "Black Property Matters," "Golden Haven, Golden Justice." At the front of the line, Aunt Leela Washington stood with a megaphone, her 72-year-old body straight and strong, her voice carrying the weight of decades of fighting for civil rights. "We've seen this before," she shouted. Black business owners were targeted. Their property was seized through legal manipulation. Their dreams were shattered by those who thought power belonged only to them. But not this time. Not here. Not in our Ammani. The crowd shouted in agreement. Beside her, Reverend Marcus Thompson of First Baptist Church, where Ammani's father was a deacon, also raised his voice. The Golden Haven Hotel represents more than one woman's success. It represents what we can do when we refuse to accept the limitations others try to impose on us, when we build despite the obstacles, when we stand together. In the lobby, Gloria James watched from the window, tears streaming down her face. The hotel had been operating under Deshawn's emergency management for the past 3 days. Logan Shaw had been fired immediately after his bail hearing and escorted off the premises by security. But the damage he had done continued. Reservations were constantly being canceled. The Thompson wedding party had moved to a rival hotel. Several corporate accounts had taken their contracts under review. The viral video, while generating support, also created fear. Did staying at Golden Haven mean becoming part of a controversy? Would guests be safe? Would they be harassed? Ammani had spent the last 72 hours in damage control mode, personally calling every reservation, every corporate account, every regular guest. She had saved some. Others, at least for now, were lost. But the community coming together like this was more valuable than any reservation. Ms. Rivers, a young woman with a podcast microphone, pushed through the crowd. Eddie Chen from the Justice Amplified podcast. "Can I get a statement?" Eddie Chen, 28 years old, was a local journalist covering social justice issues in the Southeast with a significant following. His podcast was one of the first to cover Ammani's story, and he made it clear, this isn't about a single bad arrest. This is about systematic attempts to dispossess black business owners through legal manipulation and police complicity. "Mr. Chen," Ammani smiled. "Thank you for the news. The news is just beginning," Eddie said, turning on his recorder. "I'm looking into Logan Shaw's past. Did you know he worked at 4 different hotels over the last decade? At each one there were significant demographic shifts in the customer profile after he arrived. Each one was eventually sold to development companies below market value." Ammani's investigative instincts sharpened. "Which development companies?" 3 different names, but they're all affiliated with the same parent company, Savco Development. That company is owned by Assemblyman Reeves' brother-in-law. There it was, the pattern he suspected but couldn't quite prove. Logan wasn't just a racist manager. He was a spy who systematically infiltrated successful black or diverse businesses, created conditions that forced sales, and each time worked to the advantage of the same developer network. Can you prove it? Ammani asked. I have company records, property transfer documents, email trails. It's not enough for criminal prosecution yet, but it's enough to show a pattern. Eddie's expression hardened. Miss Rivers, I believe you are the first person to effectively fight back. The others either sold out or went bankrupt fighting legal battles they couldn't afford. I can afford it, Ammani said quietly. And I won't stop. That afternoon in her office, as Ammani spread the documents across her desk, Jada Thompson and Deshawn examined them. Officer Rohr had brought the promised evidence, body camera footage showing Hellner and Klain talking after Hellner's arrest. The video was heavy. Did you see his face when he hit that counter? Klain's voice came through the body camera's audio, high-pitched and unnervingly light. Sean said to make it look real, but I didn't think it would be this hard. Hellner's laughter was ugly. Women should know their place. She thinks she can take over a property like this, hire white men, act like she's better than us. Shaw did us a favor by reporting it. Do you think the charges will stick? It doesn't matter. Even if the charges are dropped, the damage is done. No one wants to stay at a hotel whose owner was arrested for trespassing in his own lobby. Shaw says we'll have to wait 6 months, maybe a year. The property value will drop. Savco will make an offer. Everyone will get their share. Jada paused the video. This is a conspiracy. It was premeditated, and it directly implicates the police and Logan Shaw in a coordinated effort to lower the value of your property for a planned purchase. Can we use this in court? Asked Deshawn. Officer Rohr will have to explain how he obtained this, but yes, this is admissible evidence of a conspiracy to deprive someone of their civil rights. Jada took notes in her notebook. Combined with Eddie Chen's company documents, we can establish a pattern of behavior. RICO charges could even apply. Ammani stared at the frozen image on the screen. Hellner's smug face, caught confessing to a conspiracy that nearly destroyed everything he had built. I want everyone involved prosecuted, she said quietly. Not just civil penalties, criminal charges, jail time. I want to destroy their careers the way they tried to destroy mine. We will make that happen, Jada promised. But Ammani, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. They will attack your character, your business practices, your personal life. They will find every mistake you've ever made and blow it out of proportion. Let them try. Ammani's voice was like steel. I have documentation for everything. Every permit, every license, every tax payment, every employee evaluation. My 20-year research career taught me to document everything. They want to fight with paperwork. I'm ready. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Gloria entered, a worried look on her face. Ms. Rivers, someone wants to see you. They say they're from the city's business licensing department. They want to review our licenses. Ammani and Jada looked at each other. How convenient, Jada muttered. The inspector was a thin, white man in his 50s. With a clipboard in his hand and an arrogant attitude, he spent 3 hours examining every license, every certificate, every document Golden Haven had filed in the last 5 years. He measured the doors, counted the fire extinguishers, examined the kitchen equipment, and reviewed the employees' records. He found nothing, because there was nothing to find. But his presence had served its purpose, to unsettle the staff, to alarm the guests, to create the impression that Golden Haven was under investigation for serious violations. When the inspector finally left, Deshawn said, "This is harassment, retaliation for the lawsuit." "Documented harassment," Ammani corrected, raising her phone, which had recorded the entire inspection. "We'll add this to the evidence file." That evening, as Ammani was preparing to leave work, the office phone rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Ammani Rivers. Ms. Rivers. The voice was cultured, soft, and filled with feigned concern. "I'm Assemblyman Walter Reeve. I wanted to personally contact you regarding the unfortunate incident at your establishment." Ammani gripped the phone tighter. "Incident? Is that what we're calling police brutality and wrongful arrest now? I understand you're upset. Anyone would be. But I'm calling to propose a solution." Reeve's voice took on a reasonable tone. "Golden Haven is a beautiful property, but recent events have undeniably affected its market value. At Savco Development, my partners are prepared to make a very generous offer above market value, taking these conditions into account. You can make a significant profit and start fresh in a new place, away from all these disputes, and start fresh somewhere new. So after your employee tried to destroy the hotel's reputation, you want me to sell the hotel to your brother-in-law's company for a song?" Ammani's voice was ice cold. "Is that your offer?" A pause. Then Reeve's voice hardened. "Miss Rivers, I'm trying to help you. This matter can end quietly, to everyone's advantage, or it can escalate further with investigations, audits, and permit reviews. The city knows many ways to make life difficult for those who don't cooperate. Is that a threat, Councilman? This is a reflection of reality. You're a smart woman. You know how these things work. You can fight, you can spend years in litigation, you can watch your business lose money, or you can accept a fair offer and move on with your life. Ammani thought of her father, who had worked as a doorman in this building for 40 years. She thought about the day he signed the deed that made his dream come true. Every guest who stayed here, every employee who found pride in their work, every child who saw someone like themselves owning something beautiful. Councilman Reeve, here's my reality check. I'm not selling. Not to you, not to Savco, not to anyone else. And every conversation we've had, every threat you've made, every inspector you've sent, is documented. You and your network thought you could easily intimidate me because I'm a black woman. But I've spent 20 years investigating people like you. I know how corruption works, and I will expose every part of your plan. She hung up before he could respond. Deshawn, listening at the door, looked worried. Mom, you just declared war on a city council member. No, baby. He declared war when he sent Logan Shaw to ruin my business. I'm just fighting back. The federal case was filed a week after the arrest. Jada assembled a legal team consisting of civil rights experts from Atlanta, a RICO specialist from Washington, and local attorneys familiar with Savannah's political landscape. The list of defendants was long. Sergeant Hellner, Officer Klain, Logan Shaw, the Savannah Police Department, Councilmember Reeve, and Savco Development Corporation. The charges ranged from civil rights violations to conspiracy to commit fraud and systematic reform requiring the police department to address complaints of unlawful entry. The financial claim was a settlement agreement requiring $15 million in compensation and systematic reforms in how the police department handles complaints of unlawful entry. The media covered the story extensively. National news outlets ran headlines such as, "Black hotel owner sues after unjust arrest in his own lobby." Civil rights organizations issued statements. Legal experts wrote op-eds about property rights and racial bias. The case became the focal point for broader discussions about business ownership, police accountability, and systemic economic discrimination. But the real turning point came when Officer Rohr gave his official statement. Sitting in Jada's conference room, in front of the court reporter and cameras, the young officer recounted in detail everything he had witnessed and heard. The premeditation between Logan and the officers, the deliberate use of excessive force, the casual racism in their post-arrest conversations, the recurrence of similar incidents throughout Hellner's 20-year career. How many times have you seen Sergeant Hellner use excessive force against minority civilians? Jada asked. Rohr's jaw tightened. Personally, I've seen at least a dozen. There are probably more I haven't seen. He has a reputation in the department. We call him Hammer Hellner because he's very harsh with black and Latino suspects. Did you ever report this behavior? Once. Early in my career, I filed a complaint after seeing him choke a young man during a traffic stop. The complaint was dismissed. My sergeant told me I needed to understand how things work on the street, and that Hellner's methods get results. Who was that sergeant? Sergeant Morrison. He's a captain now. The testimonies went on for weeks. Each one added more evidence to the conspiracy theory that had now moved beyond theory and become documented fact. Logan Shaw tried to argue in his testimony that he had acted in good faith, believing Ammani to be a troubled woman who was wrongfully claiming property rights. However, when confronted with emails showing his correspondence with Reeve and Savco representatives, he invoked his Fifth Amendment right and refused to answer any further questions. Congressman Reeve's lawyer objected to the testimony, citing legislative privilege. However, Judge Morales, assigned to the case, ruled that the conspiracy charges precluded any privilege protection. When Reeve finally began to testify, his carefully guarded political image cracked under Jada's methodical questioning. Mr. Assemblyman, did you have any financial interest in Savco Developments purchasing the Golden Haven property? I have no direct ownership in Savco. I didn't ask about direct ownership, I asked about financial interest. A pause. Then, my brother-in-law is the majority shareholder. I occasionally consulted for them. What kind of consulting? Identifying properties with development potential. Properties like Golden Haven. Many properties have development potential. Jada pulled out a document. This is an email you sent to Savco's acquisition team 6 months before Miss Rivers' arrest. You wrote, Golden Haven is a prime property, but the current owners are stubborn. We need to create conditions that will force a sale. Shaw is ready. He will coordinate with the relevant departments. Can you explain what you meant by create conditions? Reeve's lawyer interjected. We will not answer that, but the damage was already done. The email was now a public document. The criminal case opened 2 weeks later. Under pressure from the viral video and the federal case, the district attorney convened a grand jury. Officer Rohr testified. Eddie Chen presented the findings of the investigation. Ammani showed his documents. Hotel staff described Logan's behavior over the past 3 years. The grand jury indicted them all. Sergeant Hellner. Assault, unlawful arrest, conspiracy, violation of civil rights under color of law. Officer Clean. Assault, unlawful arrest, conspiracy. Logan Shaw. Conspiracy to commit fraud, falsifying a police report, attempted theft by deception. Councilman Walter Reeve. Bribery, conspiracy, abuse of public office. The trials were scheduled for the following month. However, defense attorneys had already begun reaching out to Jada for a plea bargain. They knew what Ammani knew. The evidence was overwhelming. The videos were damning, the documents were clear, and the public was watching. This was not a case they could win. The only question was how long each defendant would serve. Ammani stood in his office, watching the lobby where he had been brutally attacked a few weeks earlier. The marble counter had been professionally cleaned, but he could still see the ghost of that moment, his face pressed against the stone, the handcuffs hurting his wrists, the flashes of the phones recording his humiliation. But now those same phones, the same videos were his greatest weapons. Gloria appeared at the door. "Miss Rivers? The Baptist Women's Association is here for their weekly meeting. They asked me to tell you that this week's agenda is planning for next month's Golden Haven Justice Rally." Ammani smiled. "Tell them I'll join them in a few minutes." As Gloria left, Deshawn entered with a file. "Mom, the reservations are coming in. We're at 70% occupancy for next month. The teachers' union wants to reschedule their conferences here, and the NAACP wants to hold their regional meetings in our ballroom." "Good," Ammani said softly. "That's very good. Are you okay?" She considered the question. Was she okay? She had been persecuted, arrested, her career nearly ruined, her character attacked. She faced months of trials and testimony. The trauma of the marble countertop hitting her face still woke her some nights, but she was fighting back. She had evidence. He had the support of the community. Justice was within his grasp. "I'm getting better, baby," he told his son. "I'm getting better." And for the first time since that dreadful Tuesday afternoon, he believed it was true. The Richard B. Russell Federal Building in Savannah stood imposing against the summer sky, its granite facade designed to reflect both authority and permanence. 8 weeks after Ammani's arrest, on a humid Monday morning in late June, the building was filled with people who had come to watch the trial that had captivated the city. United States v. Handler, Cleany, Shaw, and Reeve had become more than just a criminal case. It was a referendum on police accountability, labor rights, and whether the justice system could hold powerful people accountable for conspiring against a black woman who dared to succeed. The courtroom was packed with people standing to watch. Ammani sat at the defense table with Deshawn and Aunt Leela. Behind the prosecution table, surrounded by familiar faces, Gloria and the hotel staff, members of the Baptist Women's Association, Eddie Chen with his podcast equipment, and dozens of community members who had supported her through this nightmare. 4 defendants and their expensive lawyers sat at the defense table. Sergeant Hellner was wearing a suit instead of his uniform and looked older and smaller without the authority of his badge. Officer Cleany sat next to him and was clearly nervous, constantly adjusting his tie. Logan Shaw had lost weight, his once well-groomed appearance now looking haggard. Councilman Reeve maintained his political cool, but the helplessness in his eyes could not be entirely concealed. Judge Patricia Morales presided over the hearing, the same judge who had dismissed the initial charges against Ammani and was assigned to oversee the federal trial. During pre-trial motions, she had made it clear that she would not tolerate theatrics in the courtroom and expected both sides to present their cases professionally. The prosecutor, a 50-year-old man who had built his career prosecuting civil rights violations. He rose with the controlled intensity of someone who had waited his entire career for such a clear-cut case, and delivered his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Williams began, approaching the jury box, "this case is about a conspiracy, a deliberate, calculated plan. This case is about a conspiracy where powerful men believed they could use their badges and political offices to steal what they couldn't buy, and what happens when the victims refuse to stay silent." He brought up the first image on the courtroom monitors, Ammani's official business registration, stamped and approved by the city of Savannah. Ammani Rivers is the documented, legal, and undisputed owner of the Golden Haven Hotel. There is no doubt about this. The title is registered. The business license is valid. Property taxes have been paid. All legal requirements for ownership have been met for 5 years. The next slide showed frames from the arrest video. Ammani's face was being slammed against a marble countertop. Yet on May 17, he was arrested in his own lobby, accused of trespassing on property he legally owned, assaulted by police officers who knew or should have known he was the owner, all because of a false report by the general manager, a man he employed. Williams clicked for more images. Logan Shaw's meeting with Assemblyman Reeve, email correspondence, corporate documents linking Savco development to previous property purchases, bank records showing payments Savco made to shell companies controlled by Reeve. This was no mistake. This was a plan. Logan Shaw had been placed at Golden Haven to create conditions that would force Miss Rivers to sell her property below market value to Savco Development, a company controlled by Congressman Reeve's family. When Miss Rivers refused to be intimidated by his racist management style, they resorted to a false arrest. When that failed, they tried harassment and media manipulation. He turned directly to the jury. The evidence you will see and hear next week will prove beyond any doubt that these 4 men conspired to deprive Ammani Rivers of her civil rights, her property, and her dignity. They did this knowingly. They did this intentionally. And they did this because they believed a black woman would not have the resources or courage to fight back. Williams returned to his seat. They were wrong, and it is your duty to hold them accountable. The defense attorneys attempted to cast doubt in their opening statements, suggesting that all of this was a misunderstanding, that Logan truly believed he was protecting the hotel, that the police were responding to a legitimate complaint, but their arguments fell flat against the weight of the video evidence and the documented conspiracy theory. The prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming. First witness, Ammani Rivers. She took the stand wearing the signature navy suit and gold scarf she had worn the day she was arrested. Her natural curls were professionally styled, her posture was upright, and her voice was steady despite the trauma of reliving that day. Prosecutor Williams gently recounted her background. She had worked as a civil rights researcher for 20 years. Her father had worked as a janitor in the Golden Haven building. He had worked hard for 5 years to restore the property. He took pride in being a property owner. Miss Rivers, tell the jury what happened on May 17. Ammani took a breath, her hands resting calmly in her lap. When my general manager, Logan Shaw, came to my office with 2 police officers, I was reviewing financial reports in my office. They claimed I had entered my own hotel without permission. What was your response? At first I was confused. I thought it was a mistake. I told them I owned the hotel and offered to show them the documents, but Sergeant Hellner didn't want to look at any evidence. He said I had to come with them immediately. Did you resist? No, I remained calm. I wanted to call my lawyer. Sergeant Hellner took my phone and broke it. When I tried to explain that I had proof of ownership, he grabbed my arm so hard it bruised and dragged me into the lobby. Williams showed the security camera footage on the monitors in the courtroom. Is this what happened next? The jury watched silently as the video played. Ammani was being pushed forcefully toward the marble counter. He was trying to explain calmly. Hellner suddenly used force, slamming him face first onto the stone. A sickening thud. Blood. Handcuffs. The sheer brutality of it all. Several jurors were visibly disturbed. A woman covered her mouth. Miss Rivers, you were injured in this attack. Can you describe your injuries? A concussion from hitting the counter, a lip laceration requiring stitches, bruising on the jawbone, shoulder injuries from my arms being violently twisted behind my back. Ammani's voice remained steady, but the physical injuries healed. The trauma of being treated so cruelly in the place my father imagined for me is harder to escape. Williams showed the jury the medical records documenting each injury. Photographs taken during Ammani's arrest, showing bruises on his face. The torn blazer he had been wearing was now preserved as evidence. What happened to your business after the arrest? Reservations were canceled immediately. While the viral video ultimately helped expose the conspiracy, it initially caused people to fear staying at Golden Haven. We lost about 60% of our reservations within the first week. Corporate clients suspended their contracts. We faced constant questions about whether the hotel was safe. How much revenue did you lose? The direct loss in the first month was about $340,000. The long-term loss of reputation is still being calculated, but we estimate the total impact to be over $2 million. Defense attorneys attempted to undermine his testimony during cross-examination, arguing that he had argued with officers, that he should have simply complied and dealt with it later, and that the decision to file federal charges was more about revenge than justification. Ammani responded calmly and decisively to each accusation. Until I was physically assaulted, I remained calm and professional throughout the encounter. Video evidence confirms this. As for compliance, I complied. I identified myself, presented my documents, and made no threatening gestures. What I refused to do was act as if I did not own my property in order to appease racist men. Second witness, Deshaun Rivers. He described watching his mother's arrest and how his military training conflicted with the helplessness of watching his mother endure cruel treatment without being able to do anything. My mother was always the strongest person I knew, he said, his voice filled with emotion. Watching her face hit the counter, seeing the blood on her face, watching her being treated like a criminal in the place she worked to build for 5 years, being told to back off. Those were the most helpless moments I've felt since my father died. Third witness, Gloria James. 68-year-old Gloria drew the courtroom's attention with her calm dignity and clear recollection of events. I've worked in the hospitality industry for 40 years, she testified. I've seen many managers come and go, but Mr. Shaw was different. He didn't just manage, he manipulated. He would make comments about our ethnic hairstyles, maintaining standards, attracting the right kind of customers. He meant white customers, rich white customers who didn't want to see people like me or Miss Rivers. Williams asked her to describe the day she was arrested. "I was arranging flowers when I suddenly heard a commotion. I saw Miss Rivers being dragged out of her office. She was trying to explain who she was, trying to show her documents." Mr. Shaw was standing there with a satisfied look on his face, as if he had been waiting for this moment, as if it had been planned. "Did Mr. Shaw say anything?" "He told the police that Miss Rivers had been harassing the staff for weeks and claiming she owned the hotel. That was a lie. Everyone who worked there knew she owned it. We had all been personally hired by her." Fourth witness, Officer Jason Rohr. The young officer's testimony was the prosecution's most important piece of evidence. He recounted in detail everything he heard after the arrest. Hellner and Claney's comfortable confessions of plotting, their racist comments, their admission that the arrest was planned with Logan Shaw. "Officer Rohr, why did you bring this evidence forward?" Williams asked. Rohr looked directly at the jury. "Because I became a police officer to protect people, not to help corrupt officers and politicians steal property. What happened to Ms. Rivers was wrong, and if I had remained silent I would have been complicit in that wrongdoing." The defense tried to portray him as a disgruntled employee seeking attention, but Rohr's body camera footage played in its entirety made his testimony undeniable. Fifth witness, Eddie Chen. The podcast journalist presented his findings. Logan Shaw had worked at 4 different businesses before Golden Haven, each experiencing similar demographic shifts, and eventually sold to Savco Development or its affiliates. Traces of corporate documents linking Councilmember Reeve to Savco through shell companies and family connections. Real estate value analysis showing how each business systematically lost value before the forced sales. Eddie stated this was not an isolated incident. It was a business model. Identify successful minority-owned businesses in prime locations. Plant someone like Logan Shaw to create problems. Engage in negative publicity tactics like fake arrests. Force the business owner to sell below market value. Profit from redevelopment. The evidence was overwhelming. Email exchanges between Logan and Reeve discussing creating pressure points. Bank statements showing Savco's payments to Reeve's consulting firm. Text messages coordinating Ammani's arrest to coincide with a teachers' conference for maximum public impact. The defense fought back. Hellner's character witnesses spoke of his 20-year career. Force usage experts attempted to justify his actions. Logan's attorneys argued that he acted in good faith, based on genuine concerns. Reeve's lawyers claimed that his communications with Savco were legitimate consulting work, but they had no answer for the videos. They had no explanation for the documented pattern. They had no justification for the coordinated conspiracy, clearly expressed in his own words in emails and text messages. Closing arguments were made on Friday afternoon, with the courtroom filled with observers following every moment of the trial. Prosecutor Williams stood before the jury one last time. "You've seen the evidence. You've heard the testimony. You've watched the videos. The question before you is not whether these men are guilty. The evidence proves that beyond a shadow of a doubt. The question is whether you are willing to hold them accountable despite their positions of power and authority." He gestured toward the defense table. A police sergeant who thought his badge gave him the right to bully a business owner, an officer who followed orders he knew were wrong, a manager who conspired to destroy an employer's livelihood, a city council member who used his position to organize theft under the guise of development. Ms. Rivers built something beautiful, something her father dreamed of but never saw, and these men tried to take it from her with lies, violence, and abuse of authority. They documented their own conspiracy in emails and text messages because they never thought they'd be caught. They never thought the cameras would matter more than their badges, so they treated her ruthlessly on camera. Williams returned to the prosecutor's desk, his final words echoing in the courtroom. They were wrong. The cameras mattered. Documentation mattered. The truth mattered. And it's your job to make sure justice matters too. The jury deliberated for 14 hours over 2 days. When they returned, the jury foreman, a middle-aged black woman who had been a teacher for 30 years, stood up and read the verdict in a clear, decisive voice. In the case of the United States versus Dale Hellner, on the charge of assault under the color of law, guilty. On the charge of deprivation of civil rights, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. On the charge of filing a false report, guilty. She repeated the same thing for all the defendants and all the charges. Guilty. 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 Every charge. Every defendant. The courtroom stirred. Ammani sat motionless, Deshaun holding his hand with one hand and Aunt Leila's hand with the other. Tears streamed down his face, but he made no sound. The burden of 8 weeks, the weight of a lifetime's struggle for honor and respect was finally lifted. Judge Morales banged his gavel to restore order. Sentencing will be given 4 weeks from today. The defendants will remain in custody until sentencing. As federal marshals led the 4 men away in handcuffs, Hellner's face was a mask of shock and disbelief. Claney looked sick. Logan stared at the floor, his expensive suit now a costume he would never wear again. And Reeve, the polite politician-like Assemblyman Reeve, finally lost his composure, anger and fear seeping through the cracks of his carefully maintained mask. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun somehow felt hotter. Ammani stood on the steps with her legal team, her family, her community, and the media that had followed every moment of her struggle. "Miss Rivers, how do you feel?" asked a reporter. Ammani considered the question. How did she feel? Vindicated, exhausted, victorious, traumatized, all at once. "Today justice was served," she said finally. "Not just for me, but for all business owners targeted because of their race, for all people told they don't belong where they deserve to be, for my father, who worked for 40 years dreaming that one day his daughter could own a place like Golden Haven." She looked at the cameras. These rulings send a message. Badges don't grant immunity. Political power doesn't protect criminals. And black women who create beautiful things won't stay silent when people try to destroy them. Gloria stepped forward and hugged Ammani tightly. "Your father is so proud of you, baby, so proud." As the celebration continued, Ammani allowed herself a moment to breathe. The decisions had been made. Punishments would be handed down. Things would be set right. The trauma would heal, slowly but surely. She had resisted. She had won. And the Golden Haven Hotel still stood, gleaming in the Georgia sun, owned by the daughter of a doorman who dared to dream. 4 weeks after the guilty verdicts, the same federal courtroom filled again for sentencing. But this time the atmosphere was different. Not tense with uncertainty, but heavy with the expectation that justice would finally be measured. Ammani, along with Deshawn, Aunt Lalael, and Gloria, surrounded by the same community members who had attended every day of the trial. Behind them was a gallery filled with people who had come to see the responsibilities fulfilled. The 4 defendants stood before Judge Patricia Morales in prison, Orange. Their expensive suits and authority had vanished in the face of their convictions. They had pleaded for leniency, arguing about their lawyers, their families, their careers, their public service records, and the devastating effects of their prison sentences. These pleas were a waste of paper. Judge Morales looked at each defendant in turn, her expression reflecting the controlled anger of seeing injustice documented in painful detail. "Mr. Hellner," he began, addressing the former sergeant, "you swore to protect and serve. Instead, you used your badge as a weapon to terrorize a businessman whose only crime was being a successful black businessman. You conspired with criminals. You assaulted. You filed false reports. And you have shown no remorse throughout this trial." Hellner moved his jaw, but said nothing. "For the crime of assault under the guise of the law, I sentence you to 5 years in federal prison. For the crime of deprivation of civil rights, I sentence you to 4 consecutive years in prison. For the crime of conspiracy, I sentence you to 3 consecutive years in prison. For the crime of filing false reports, I sentence you to 2 consecutive years in prison. Total sentence, 14 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole." The number hit him like a physical blow. 14 years. Hellner would be 57 when released, his career ruined, his pension taken away. Furthermore, Judge Morales continued, "You are permanently barred from any law enforcement position and from carrying a weapon. You will forfeit all your retirement benefits and all compensation accrued during your years of service." He turned to Officer Clean. "Mr. Clean, you knew what you were participating in was wrong. You had the opportunity to stop it, report it, refuse to participate. Instead, you carried out orders you knew were illegal and participated in the savagery against an innocent woman." Clean's face drained of color. "I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison for assault and consecutive sentences for conspiracy and civil rights violations. Additionally, you are permanently barred from law enforcement and forfeit all your retirement benefits." Next was Logan Shaw. The former director looked like he had aged a decade in the last few months, his once well-groomed appearance now weary and broken. "Mr. Shaw, you infiltrated Miss Rivers' business and intended to destroy her for financial gain. You filed false police reports. You conspired to take her property. You used racism as a business strategy. Your actions were more than simple criminal behavior. They were a breach of trust, systematic and calculated exploitation." Judge Morales' voice hardened. "I sentence you to 6 years in federal prison for conspiracy, plus additional time for fraud and filing false reports. You will also compensate for the direct financial damages caused by your actions." Finally, he addressed Assemblyman Walter Reeve. The former politician stood stiffly, his carefully guarded composure finally cracking under the weight of the impending verdict. "Assemblyman Reeve, you were in a position of public trust. Citizens elected you to protect their interests, represent their community, and use your authority for the public good. Instead, you used your position to establish a criminal organization designed to steal property from minority business owners. You corrupted police officers. You manipulated the system. You profited from the destruction of dreams and livelihoods. Judge Morales leaned forward. Your crimes represent the worst kind of corruption, the systematic abuse of public office for personal gain, to the detriment of the most vulnerable. The court finds your actions particularly egregious because they were hidden behind the guise of legitimate development and urban renewal. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison on RICO charges, conspiracy, bribery, and abuse of public office. You are permanently barred from holding public office, working for any government agency, or serving on corporate boards. All assets derived from your criminal enterprise will be forfeited and used to compensate the victims. 15 years. When Reeve is released, he will be 67 years old. His political career will be ruined, his reputation will be destroyed, and his family's business empire will be shattered. As the marshals led the four men away, Hellner still defiant, Klain visibly weeping, Logan devastated, Reeve desperately clinging to his dignity. Ammani felt Deshawn squeeze her hand. "It's over, Mom," she whispered. Finally over, but Ammani knew better. The criminal case was over. The healing would take longer. Justice had been served, but the scars remained. Still, watching these four men who had tried to destroy what she had built being taken to prison was a good start. The civil lawsuit was settled 3 weeks later for $4.5 million. After reviewing the criminal convictions, video evidence, and documents detailing the course of events, the city's insurance company decided that a trial would be more costly. But the settlement wasn't just about money, it also included comprehensive reforms. The Savannah Police Department would implement mandatory de-escalation training. All officers would be equipped with body cameras, and footage would be automatically backed up to independent servers. A civilian oversight board would review all use-of-force incidents. Trespassing complaint procedures would be reorganized to require verification of property ownership before any arrest. And the city would fund a business protection program to help minority-owned businesses counter similar targeting. Ammani stood in Attorney Jada Thompson's office, looking at the settlement agreement. $4.5 million. It was enough to restore Golden Haven to its former glory, expand it, and create a legacy that would honor his father's memory. But the reforms were the most important thing, because money couldn't erase the trauma, but systemic change could prevent others from experiencing the same thing. "What will you do with your share?" Jada asked. The settlement was divided. $1.2 million would go directly to Ammani for damages, with the remainder distributed among other victims of similar schemes uncovered by Eddie Chen's investigation. "Part of it will go toward expanding the hotel," Ammani said. "But I want to create something else, a foundation that provides legal support and business protection services to minority-owned businesses facing the kind of targeting I experienced. I'll name it the Clayton Rivers Foundation, inspired by my father." Jada smiled. "My father would be proud. I hope so." The grand reopening celebration would take place on a Saturday in late August, 3 months after the arrest that had nearly destroyed everything. Golden Haven glistened in the afternoon sunlight. Its historic facade had been newly restored, its interior refreshed with new furnishings and technology. But the spirit of the place remained. The elegant marble lobby, where Ammani had been brutally attacked, was now a testament to resilience. A small plaque had been discreetly placed next to the reception desk. In memory of those who fought for honor and justice in the areas they won, the lobby was filled with people who had supported Ammani during its darkest days. The Baptist Women's Association had organized a gospel choir. The teachers' union had sent representatives. Local business owners who had suffered similar attacks had also come to celebrate. Eddie Chen was there with his podcast equipment, documenting the triumphant conclusion of the story he had helped bring to light. But the most important part of the reopening was Gloria's Corner Cafe. The hotel restaurant had been renovated and renamed in honor of the woman who had worked loyally for 5 years, stood by Ammani when others fled, and represented the dignity and excellence Golden Haven had always strived for. Gloria stood at the entrance of the cafe in an elegant burgundy dress. Reverend Thompson blessed the place, tears streaming down his weathered face. His granddaughter, who painted the hotel's pastel portrait, stood beside him holding a large pair of scissors for the ribbon cutting. "This is not just a cafe," Ammani told the gathered crowd. "It's a message that loyalty matters. Perfection comes from people who care. Golden Haven is successful because of people like Gloria, who put their hearts into making guests feel welcome and valued." As the ribbon was cut, the scissors glinted in the sunlight. Applause echoed through the lobby as people rushed forward to hug Gloria, congratulate her, and be the first customers at the cafe serving recipes from her grandmother, who had worked as a cook in Savannah's elite homes a century ago but was never allowed to start her own business. Her legacy now lived on in the golden-spiced coffee and honey butter cookies served at the place named after her granddaughter. The celebration lasted for hours. The gospel choir sang "Oh Happy Day" and "We Shall Overcome." Deshawn gave a speech about his mother's courage and his grandfather's dream. Aunt Leela reminded everyone that this victory belonged to the entire community standing together. And throughout it all, Ammani mingled with the crowd, shaking hands, hugged and thanked everyone who made this moment possible. By late afternoon, Ammani found herself in her office, lost in thought for a moment. The last 3 months had been the most difficult period of her life, more difficult than her father's death, more traumatic than any case she had investigated in 20 years. But she had survived. More than survived, she had won. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Eddie Chen stood there with a package. "Miss Rivers, this was delivered for you. There's no return address, just your name." Ammani took the package carefully. It was a slightly padded, somewhat heavy envelope. Her detective instincts kicked in immediately. Anonymous deliveries are rarely innocent. She opened the package carefully. There was only one thing inside, a memory card from a police body camera in a plastic case. No note, no explanation, just the card with an unfamiliar ID number. His heart raced as he inserted the card into his laptop. The video player opened and showed footage from the day of his arrest. But this wasn't from any of the 3 officers involved in his case. This camera angle was different. Someone had been standing back, observing. The timestamp showed 20 minutes before his arrest. The footage captured a private conversation in the police station parking lot. Several people were gathered around the patrol car, their faces clearly visible in the midday sun. Sergeant Hellner, Officer Kleinien, Rar were there. And then a calm, measured voice was heard off camera. "Make it look tough. That's more useful for us." The camera stopped recording and Ammani's breath caught. The speaker was wearing a smart suit instead of a uniform. His silver hair was neatly combed, his expression calculating. The name tag on his jacket read Chief Dawson, the name of the man who, as police chief, had promised the public a thorough investigation into his arrest. The name of the man who positioned himself as a reformer, who claimed to support accountability. The same man who, in the footage now emerging, had planned everything from the start. The video continued, showing Chief Dawson giving detailed instructions about the impending arrest. "It needs to look bad enough to provoke him and push him over the edge, but not so bad that it blows back on us. When he gives up and sells out, Savco will step in, Reeve will get his cut, and everyone will come out ahead, including the department. These development fees will fund our budget for years." Ammani's hands didn't shake as he saved the file to an encrypted folder. Despite his shock, his investigative training kicked in. This wasn't just about Hellner, Cleany, Logan and Reeve. It was higher up. Chief Dawson, who positioned himself as the solution, had been the architect of this plan from the beginning. He sacrificed his subordinates to protect himself, pinning the blame on them to preserve his reformist image. He probably expected them to remain silent, to accept their punishment rather than accuse him. And he almost succeeded. But another conscientious officer, perhaps, had ensured the truth came out. Ammani took out the memory card and walked to the safe in his office. He placed the card in a secure box next to his most important documents. Like justice, evidence sometimes had to wait for the right moment. He stood there for a long time, holding the card, thinking about patterns, power, and the ways corruption protects itself. Chief Dawson had played his role perfectly, the concerned authority figure, the champion of reform, the man who cleaned up the department by removing the bad actors he himself had hired and managed. How many others were there? How deep did the web go? How many businesses had been stolen by this system before Ammani had the resources and courage to fight it? "Justice never ends," he whispered, closing the safe with a solid click. But this chapter is over. He had won the battle. The men who had attacked him directly were in jail. The hotel had been restored, and business was back on track. The immediate threat had been eliminated, but the fight against corruption continued, and now he had proof of a bigger fish, one that had managed to escape while his subordinates drowned. For now he would keep that evidence safe. He would increase his power. He would establish the Clayton Rivers Foundation. He would create networks and resources. And when the time came, when his allies were ready, when the political landscape changed, when Chief Dawson felt secure and untouchable, then he would act. But tonight was not for new battles. Tonight was for honoring the victories already won. Ammani gathered her things and returned to the lobby. The celebration was ending, but a joyful energy lingered. Gloria stood at the door of her new cafe, smiling proudly. Deshawn was talking to Officer Rohr, who had resigned from the police force and was now considering a job at Ammani's new foundation. Aunt Lalila sat with the Baptist Women's Association, planning their next community initiative. In the middle of the lobby, a golden bell hung on a polished mahogany stand. Her late husband Marcus had had this bell made 15 years ago when they first dreamed of owning a hotel together. After Marcus's death, the bell had sat in storage until Ammani bought Golden Haven. Now it hung as a symbol of dreams realized, hardships overcome, and hard-won victories. As Ammani approached the bell, the room slowly fell silent. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Everyone understood the significance of this moment. With one hand she lifted the bell. Its weight was familiar and comforting, a physical embodiment of Marcus's dreams, his father's legacy, and his own determination. He rang the bell once, and it emitted a clear, pure sound that echoed through the lobby. The sound reverberated off the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, resonating with everyone who had stood by Golden Haven during its darkest days. In that clear ring, they heard victory, justice, regained honor. The sound slowly faded, leaving a hopeful silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Clayton Rivers Foundation had to be established. Other business owners would need support. Chief Dawson and the other members of his network had to finally be exposed and held accountable. But tonight, in this moment, victory was complete. Ammani looked around the lobby, the polished marble that had treated her harshly, but now shone with resilience. The loyal staff, the gathered community, the cafe bearing Gloria's name, the plaque honoring everyone who fought for honor in the spaces they deserved. Her father had worked as a janitor in this building for 40 years and had dreamed that one day his daughter would own it. That dream had come true. It had been threatened. It had almost been destroyed. And in the end it had been defended with evidence, the support of the community, and unwavering determination. Deshaun approached and draped his arm over his mother's shoulders. "You did it, Mom," just like Grandpa predicted. Ammani leaned into her son's embrace, feeling the weight of the last 3 months finally lift. "We did it, baby, all of us together." Outside the window, Savannah's sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tourists walked the sidewalk, some stopping to photograph the historic building, unaware of the battle fought within its walls. The Golden Haven Hotel stood tall, owned by a doorman's daughter, protected by a community that refused to let injustice prevail, proof of what people could do when they came together against corruption and the abuse of power. In the safe in his office, evidence of deeper corruption awaited the right moment. But that would be tomorrow, next month, when the time came. Tonight was for celebrating survival, honoring those who stood by him, and acknowledging that the fight against injustice was definitively won while the battle raged on. Gloria emerged from her cage with a tray of honey butter cookies, lovingly prepared in a place named after her, according to her grandmother's recipe. Fresh from the oven, folks. The celebration resumed, laughter and songs rising. The golden bell, having done its job, announced that justice, delayed, fought for, hard-won though it was, had been secured, and stood silently on its stand. Ammani Rivers stood in the lobby of the hotel her father had dreamed of, and she had defended with everything she had, surrounded by her people. They had tried to take it from her. They had failed. And the Golden Haven Hotel would stand for generations, reminding us that ownership matters, that documents matter, that community support can defeat corruption, and that black women who build something beautiful will not be silent when people try to destroy it. The golden bell would ring again, for weddings, celebrations, and future victories, but it would also ring as a warning to anyone who thought badges, power, or political connections could overshadow the truth. Justice had been served, and Ammani Rivers was just getting started.